Welcome. This program is part of the Peek into Painting series with Penobscot Marine Museum in Searsport, Maine. Let's take a look at this painting. I know I picked it, but it wasn't my favorite painting. I thought it was boring. I mostly picked it because it was a schooner and we haven't looked at many schooner paintings. A schooner has 2 or more masts, all fore and aft rigged. And we can see that this vessel has 4 masts and they're all fore and aft rigged. As we zoom in, we can see some of the details of the schooner. We can also see the crew. How many crew members do you see? I see 11 total. And this is a big vessel. It takes a long time to pan across the painting. These guys are standing near the wheel back here. I can't quite make out the name of the ship, but it is labeled right there. And as we go up the mast, we see an American flag at the top and signal flags right here. But other than the schooner, what's in this painting? There's nothing in the background. All you can see is the ocean, and the ocean meets the sky. Yet this ocean isn't, and the sky aren't boring. Look at this sky. There's a little peak of blue right here up in this corner, but there's also some very dark spots. Look back here. Is a storm coming? Suddenly there's some drama in what I first thought was a boring painting. The water is full of movement. The waves aren't huge, but the ocean is definitely not smooth. And the darkness of the water reflects the potential storminess of the sky. In the right corner, let's see if I can scroll in, we can see a signature, and it says Antonio Jacobsen, 1918. Antonio Jacobsen was born in Copenhagen, Denmark in 1850. He immigrated to the United States in the early 1870s and settled in the New York City area. His first job in the US was painting decorative scenes on the doors of iron safes, but he soon moved on to painting ship portraits. Before his death in 1921, he likely painted over 6,000 paintings, almost all ships. The Penobscot Marine Museum has several other Jacobsen paintings. Let's return to those signal flags. One use of signal flags is to identify a vessel to other vessels, kind of like a license plate on an automobile. The assigned letters were published in shipping registers. So what letters are these? Do you know what those signal flags represent? This top one is L, H. The third one is a little bit of, I'm not sure about this one. It's called the code flag, and I've been reading up on signal flags, but I'm not sure why they would use a code flag in this context. What do you think? Do you know the answer to that? And then the bottom one is K. So just by looking at this painting, we've gathered a lot of information about it. Aside from that code flag, the signal flags provide almost enough information to determine the name of this vessel. The US government published an annual list of merchant vessels of the United States, and I was able to use Google Books to access the 1921 edition held at Harvard University. Here's a snip. At the top of page 40, we see the letters LHFK. That is very close to our painting, and in fact, the vessel in our painting is a schooner named Nancy Hanks. According to this list, she had a gross tonnage of 1,162 and a net tonnage of 1,030. She was 204 feet long, 41 feet wide, and 19.2 feet deep. She needed a crew of 9 and was built in 1917 at Thomaston, Maine. Her home port, or where her permanent document was issued, was New York, New York. This also makes sense since we know the artist Antonio Jacobsen worked primarily out of New York Harbor. Located at the mouth of the St. George River, Thomaston, Maine has a long history of shipbuilding. So here's Thomaston right here. And to give a little bit of context, Searsport is up here at the mouth of Penobscot Bay. And there's Rockland. So over land, Rockland and Thomaston are very close to each other, but by water, not so much. Before 1820, over 70 vessels were built in Thomaston. Demand and production increased, and in the 1850s alone, over 100 vessels were constructed. Nearly 1,000 vessels total were likely built in Thomaston. After the Civil War, shipbuilding throughout Maine began to decline, but some towns were able to continue building schooners into the 20th century. After 1905, shipbuilding petered out. Yet the Nancy Hanks was completed in 1917. Why? What was happening in 1917? Okay, I know the title of this talk gives it away. World War I prompted a need for all kinds of ships, and many wooden shipyards of Maine, including several in Thomaston, experienced a brief resurgence. Perhaps it is best captured in the words from the time. Here's an article from Belfast's Republican Journal that was published on May 24th, 1917. I accessed it on the Library of Congress's Chronicling America Historic American Newspapers database.
It begins to look like old times in Thomaston. Thomaston, May 16th. The launching of a 4-masted schooner from the Dunn Elliott Yard next Tuesday will be the first event of the kind which has taken place in that town for 17 years, and is expected to draw a crowd from far and near. The rising banks of the George River form a natural grandstand, and when they are thronged once more with happy spectators, the older residents will look back to the days when Thomaston's thrifty joiners fashioned the famous ships which gave the town its reputation as a seaport. Are those days coming back? Probably not, to the extent of building those majestic square-rigged craft, which sailed to all corners of the world. But with all the work ahead that Thomaston can handle for at least another year, the townspeople are viewing the situation much more complacently than they were a few months ago, when the waterfront was in a state of almost silent and profitless glory. The schooner, which is now receiving its finishing touches in the Dun Elliott Yard, was built by George A. Gilchrist, whose lease of that shipyard expires when the launching takes place. Mr. Gilchrist has played the shipbuilding game many years, but this is the first vessel that he has constructed in a Knox County shipyard since he launched the steamer Ruth south of the Snow Yard in Rockland. Mr. Gilchrist went from Rockland to Belfast, where he built such fine crafts as the 3- and 4-masted schooners named Theoline, the schooner Henry B. Fisk and Frank Barnett, and the government dredges Cumberland and Key West. He sold the shipyard 6 or 7 years ago, and it was turned into a mill property, which seemed wise judgment with shipbuilding so much below par. The war, with consequent high freights and abnormal demand for wooden vessels, evoked an early response from Mr. Gilchrist, who leased the Dun Elliott Company's yard more than a year ago, and contracted with Frank B. and Fred McQuestion of Boston for the construction of a 4-masted schooner. With a deadweight carrying capacity of about 2,000 tons, the McQuestons wanted her for the hard pine trade. But much as they wanted her, they were not insensible to the allurements of a handsome offer made by New York parties, and they sold her on the stocks. Mr. Gilchrist does not know the names of the new owners, and doesn't even know what the new name of the vessel will be. Nancy Hanks was to have been the name, and it had been painted in the proper places, but the builder is prepared to eliminate it and to put on whatever the title the new owners may decide upon. It's one thing to lease a shipyard and get your contract to build a vessel, but in these days it is quite another thing to get your materials. The frame which was to have been delivered to Mr. Gilchrist last July didn't arrive until October, and the last of the hard pine was not in the yard until the winter snowstorms had come on. Mr. Gilchrist is philosophical to the last degree, however, and through all these exasperating delays, the genial play of his ruddy features never abated an iota. The keel was laid in September, and 75 men have pushed forward the work with all possible speed, until the nearly finished product stands on the riverbank, compelling the admiration of all beholders. The new schooner is built on a Dun Elliott model and will practically duplicate the Helen E. Taft, which was constructed by that firm. It has a gross tonnage of 1160 and a net tonnage of 1,000. The registered dimensions are length of keel 190 feet, breadth of beam 41 feet, depth of hold 19 feet. The oak frame was cut in pemaquid. The moment this schooner goes overboard, Dun & Elliott Company will begin the construction of a craft which will be practically its duplicate. The yard is already littered with materials for the proposed craft, which will enjoy the novelty of having a frame which was cut on the western coast. Thomaston's greatest shipbuilding activity, however, will be found in what was formerly known as the Washburn Yard, where the Atlantic Coast Company already has a large 4-masted schooner sealed up and deck beams in. When it launches next August, the vacant ways will be used for the construction of a similar craft. Meanwhile, however, the yard will have been sufficiently enlarged for the laying of still another keel, ensuring steady work in the yard for at least another year. These vessels will register about 1,600 tons gross and will have a carrying capacity of 2,400 tons. They will be duplicates of the schooner Joseph B. Thomas, which the Washburns built 17 years ago. Their approximate dimensions will be length of keel 210 feet, breadth of beam 41 feet, depth of hold 22 feet. The frame for the schooner now on the stocks is composite in character, if not in material, having been cut in 4 widely scattered localities. The floor is the product of an aristic forest. The oak was cut in Virginia. The spruce top came from Nova Scotia, while the oak top timbers were hewn in the woods of our own Warrentown. Ira Vinyl of Thomaston is master builder, and the name is synonymous with first-class Thomaston vessel products. The Washburns built in this yard exactly 20 vessels, the largest of which was the 5-masted schooner Washington B. Thomas, which was wrecked near Old Orchard on her second voyage. With the decline of shipbuilding, the yard was sold to J.A. Creighton and Company, from whom it is now leased for 10 years by the Atlantic Coast Company. Walter D. Noyes of Boston is president of the latter concern. Lewis K. Thurlow of Boston is treasurer, and W.G. Washburn, formerly of Washburn Brothers, is manager. The company is employing at the present time 38 men in vessel construction and 10 men in extending the yard so that it may be ready for laying another keel. Manager Washburn is especially proud of the yard's modern facilities, which include a large mill with electric motor power and a compressed air plant for boring and driving. Nothing gives him more satisfaction than to see a workman sink a 2-foot auger in 11 seconds and a 3-foot auger in 1/2 minute. When augers are worked by hand, it is a lively man who can sink a 3-foot borer in 20 minutes. In addition to taking a 10-year lease of the Washburn Creighton Yard, the Atlantic Coast Company bought the Washburn Sail Loft and office building, a fine piece of property at the foot of Knox Street and adjoining the Maine Central Railroad track.
It must have been a very exciting time in Thomaston. Returning back to our painting of the Nancy Hanks after she was launched, she traveled the Atlantic Basin, including the ports of Cape Town, Buenos Aires, Barcelona, Jacksonville, and New York, carrying coal, lumber, salt, and lime. Here's a photo of the Nancy Hanks loading granite at Stonington, Maine settlement quarry, with quarry rail tracks and large derricks in the foreground. Stories of black cats and a mutiny and a murder, her captain lost at sea, and stranding on a Florida reef plagued this vessel's record. True or not, she only lasted 10 years before finally burning up. Let's end with one more look at the Nancy Hanks in her days of glory. And then those last exciting glory days, one more spurt of wooden shipbuilding in the late 1910s. The music accompanying the painting is titled Let's All Be Americans Now, written by Irving Berlin, Edgar Leslie, and George W. Meyer, and published in 1917. It became a popular song right around the time the Nancy Hanks was launched. Special thanks to pianist Laura Laubenthal, and thank you for joining me for this peek into paintings with the Penobscot Marine Museum. Let's enjoy a final look at Antonio Jacobsen's 1918 oil on millboard, Schooner Nancy Hanks.